record or many people will not be happy with me. Okay, we are recording. And okay, we are at week 5 of Jacob, and where we left off, Jacob with his 2 wives and their 2 maidservants were leaving and going back to Jacob's home. And with them also, Leah had, I'm giving you the countdown here, Leah has 6 sons. Zilpah, who is Leah's maidservant, has 2 sons. Bilhah, who is Rachel's maidservant, has 2 sons. And Rachel finally had 1 son. So we're up to 11 sons. And by the way, Leah had a daughter on the way. So we've got
Dinah.
Dinah. Yes, she should at least have a name. 11 sons and 1 daughter. And I'm going to give everybody a spoiler alert here about why all this is important. We're going to find out, hopefully today, if we get far enough, that Jacob is going to be renamed Israel. And as I said to Scott, we've got to do the spoiler alerts. So his name is Israel, is going to be Israel. And these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And so we have 11 sons so far, and we know a 12th one's going to be born, and that is the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of the reasons why the study of Jacob is so important. Yep. And so we left off on Genesis 31. We actually left off at verse 31, but I'm going to go back a couple of verses. So where we left off is they were leaving, Jacob with all his belongings and all his family. And he was being chased, basically, by his father-in-law, Laban. And Laban had caught up to him. And they're having a discussion. And Laban says, I have the power to do great harm. But last night, the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long for your father's house. But why have you stolen my goods? I was afraid, Jacob answered, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. If you find your gods with, if you find your gods with anyone here, he shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself if anything is yours and take it back. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the idols. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, then Leah's tent, and then the tents of the 2 maidservants. But he found nothing. Then he left Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken Laban's household idols, put them in the saddlebag of her camel, and was sitting on them. And Laban searched everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, Sir, do not be angry that I cannot stand up before you, for I am having my period. So Laban searched, but could not find the household idols. Then Jacob became incensed and challenged Laban. What is my crime, he says. For what sin of mine have you so hotly pursued me? You have searched all my goods. Have you found anything that belonged to you? Put it here before my brothers and yours, that they may judge between the 2 of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flock. I did not bring you anything torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for what was stolen by day or night. For it was the heat consumed, the heat consumed me by day and the frost by night, and sleep fled from my eyes. Thus for 20 years I have served in your household, 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks. And you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, surely by now you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my affliction and the toil of my hands, and last night he rendered judgment.
So you see this thing, and you want to remember that just before this, when Jacob packed up his wives and children and all the livestock, it says he deceived Laban by leaving in the middle of the night, by not telling him he was going. I have actually known of someone that worked for an employer and said the employer didn't pay him enough, so they were justified in stealing from him, right? I mean, I was just getting what I had coming. And that's, people tend to do that. They'll justify what they've already done that way. Well, that's what's happening here. Laban runs them down, and they had a head start. So he's running his guys pretty hard. And the big deal about the idols, we talked last week, Rachel steals them and we don't know why. Or Rachel, yeah. But the fact is, I don't think he was going to ever let Jacob go. And we see in this commentary that he probably wasn't going to. But he has an excuse to run them down. And of course, Jacob says, "What did I do? I just took, my wife, my sons, my stuff, and look how hard I worked for you. 20 years, and I made you rich, and I made good whenever any animals were killed or stolen. I did it, I paid for it out of my own pocket." And so he's justifying himself, and Laban is doing the opposite. And I don't think we've gotten to it yet, but he basically says, all this stuff is mine. Even though he had an agreement with Jacob that says, you get the striped and spotted and off-colored ones, Laban is saying, the wives are mine, the children are mine, the cattle are mine. You took what's mine. And that's why I always like to say that's why God made attorneys. That's why we have courts, because that's the kind of stuff you go to court over. But it was
Julia Cruzius.
that's right. It was looking like they were gonna get attacked, that Laban was gonna attack them, and he's using the household idols as his excuse. You stole from me.
A couple of things we talked about while we were studying this is, first of all, going back to remember when Rebecca, who is Jacob's mother, said, go back to the land of my people and find a good wife, find a wife that believes in God. And yet we're in this place still with idols. How does that work?
And they're undoubtedly some people that are more devoted to Yahweh, but they also tend to have sort of a pantheon. They have a group of gods, and they may have one patron that's their primary one. And it's not exactly like we would imagine it, but that's the way it goes. In Rome, they had a temple to the unknown God, just in case, in case we've missed one. We don't want to make anybody angry. We're going to have one to the one we don't even know about. And occasionally they'd come by and drop off a little.
So that's
something.
probably why Rachel took the idols, in the fact that she just wanted to cover her bases.
Yeah, that's right. So just in case. But that's, I don't know, do we spend a whole lot of time on this part of it? You see what's happened though. And Jacob, after Laban goes through the tents, Jacob gets indignant, and he's sort of turned it around. And don't people do that? I keep pointing out things that are just very human. So it says he deceived Laban. He shouldn't have left in the middle of the night, but he's now turned it around, and now he's indignant. He says, what have I done? If you see anything here that you can say is yours, put it out here, and my brothers will judge between you and me. And this idea of judging between you and me is a common theme through the Old Testament. They'll call on God, and God will judge between you and me. But Jacob is indignant because we're told he doesn't know that Rachel really has stolen the idols. Keep in mind, it'll come up again. Jacob's name means the grasper or the deceiver. It can kind of have both of those overtones. And that's what he's known as, and that's who he is. And so, even though it's Rachel, this sort of thing seems to follow him and his household around. But he's indignant, and he says, you know, you have no right to be angry at me. I haven't done anything. I think.
Well, and the other thing, he says in verse 38, he says, I have been with you for 20 years. Just last week, we were studying the business about Jacob taking over the flocks and doing, he says, you know, give me some of the flocks, and he was going to do what you call it, selective breeding. And it sounds like that happened yesterday. This has been 6 years. One of the things that always hits me about studying the Bible, and especially like when you're in a church and someone's reading something, you lose the sense of time. It has been 20 years, you guys, 14 years for the 2 wives. And then he says, hey, give me half of the flock and let me I will take the ones that are not perfect. And he's been doing that for 6 years. So altogether, he has been there 20 years. And we have such a short timeline.
We do. We tend to look at the world in terms of our own lifespan. But we do lose track of it in here. The 6 years, some people question how he had a lot of livestock. Well, if you've got a big enough herd to begin with, 6 years of increase on a herd can be, you know, quite a bit of wealth.
Chapter 31, verse 43. But Laban answered Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, these sons are my sons, and these flocks are my flocks. Everything you see is mine. Yet, what can I do today about these daughters of mine or the children they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between you and me. So Jacob picked out a stone and set it up as a pillar. And he said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and made a mound. And there by the mound they ate. Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Gilead. Then Laban declared, the mound is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore the place was called Gilead. It was also called Mizpah, because Laban said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are absent from each other. If you mistreat my daughters or take other wives, although no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, here is the mound and here is the pillar I have set up between you and me. This mound is a witness and this pillar is a witness that I will not go past this mound to harm you, and you will not go past this mound and pillar to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their father judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and invited his relatives to eat a meal. And after they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. Early the next morning, Laban got up and kissed his grandchildren and daughters and blessed them. Then he left to return home.
So for just a minute, would you show them the map? I have it up, but hold on, not just because I'm going to go.
Okay.
So what the rest of you don't know is that when everybody came in this morning, I was cooking. This week I saw Bob at HEB, and he was lamenting the fact that they don't have the bran muffins he likes. So I'm baking some. So what you missed by not being here is warm bran muffins, and I got to go pull them out of the oven. So if you'll show the map, I'll be right back.
And I didn't even know that. Okay, so warm bran muffins are coming out of the oven. Okay, and here is the map. I thought it would be good. I always like timelines, and you have screen. Can you guys see it now? Yes. Okay, so this is, remember, this is where this goes the map up. The dark red line is where they started, and then Jacob has spent the last 20 years in Haran, and this is on his way back. And Jacob leaves Haran after having a large family and becoming prosperous. And this is where Laban chases him. So he chases him a long way. I think this is 500 miles, Scott, is that true?
Yeah.
So this is 500 miles. He's chasing him a long way. Laban chases after Jacob, catches them in the mountains of Gilead. So this is this, and on the way up, this is how he went. But this is giving you an idea. And think about it. He is traveling with a lot of stuff, lots of family, lots of, and we'll see in a while when Jacob ends up meeting Esau, how much stuff he is. Now Scott is passing out bran muffins. And I want one too. So this will make you guys come in person. Anyhow, so this is how he is going back. So Laban was really on a mission. The other thing did you want to say something about the map?
About the map?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. The other thing we need to remember, Laban said, and Jacob reminded him also, is the night before Laban got to Jacob, the God, Yahweh, our God, appeared to Laban and told him not to.
Don't
not
say
to-
anything to him. Don't.
Which meant don't harm him.
Yep. And so I always want to be sure that you're able to see these people as people and not just some sort of, icons in the story, two-dimensional. So Laban clearly didn't ride them down. They had to ride hard and fast just to say goodbye. And I told you, I don't think that Laban really ultimately thought he was ever going to let Jacob leave. He was getting rich off of Jacob's labor. Jacob was blessed. And you see in that what Mary just read is where he says, all of this stuff is mine. None of this is, you didn't have a right, because ultimately all of this is mine. Now, I want you to keep in mind that what I keep talking about is how important the lineage is, being your own nation. In that, like in Israel, they have a word that's bet, and it means the house of or the city of. So Bethlehem, it's not Bethlehem, it's Bethlehem, the town of and bread. But they name these towns after people. So if you're really important, if you're really famous, they'll name a town after you, and it becomes, Bet Aram. And that's important. If you can ever, people want to be famous. And so to have this part of his lineage and the cattle and everything walk away, this is a hard thing to let go of for people with, with that interest in mind. And his plan is to keep it, to always to keep it there. And you see that. And as Mary just said, he gets a vision the night before from Yahweh that says, don't say or do anything to Jacob. And he knows, he's already been told that the reason he's gotten so wealthy is because of Jacob. And so as much as he would like to do something, and he was going to use those household idols as an excuse, but then they didn't materialize. And so now, because, I made a big deal out of that and they're not here, I don't really have the option anymore. So he says, all this stuff is mine. But what can I do about the daughters? What can I do about the children? And it's like, they're human beings. If they don't think I'm good enough to stay with, I guess they're going to go. And he said, so this whole pantomime is playing out here. He knows he has to let him go. But here's the other thing that you got to understand. Laban is afraid of Jacob. Jacob has already amassed a lot of wealth. And he has some people with him, and he has his own tribe, he's got 12 sons. And if he lets him go, there's always a chance that he comes back, sometime in the future and goes to war and takes all of Laban's stuff. This is the way things are done then and there. And it's to some extent the way they're done now. People get revenge or people get greedy. And so what he says is, we're going to put up one of these stones, one of these monuments, and they take a stone and they turn it up on end, and they may build a mound underneath it so that it stands out over the countryside. People know something happened here even if they aren't part of it.
When I was talking to Scott, we were thinking about what that's like. To me, that's like the cross on the side of the road. When there's been an accident and someone dies and you see that cross on the side of the road and nobody seems to mess with it, that type of thing. They know someone died there. And this way they know something was done here.
They know so people don't take these down. So they really do wind up lasting a long time. But they set up a memorial site that commemorates what's happened here. And what Laban does, you can see he's afraid of him, but he invokes Jacob's God. Instead of his own, he invokes Yahweh. He says, we're going to build this and we're going to let your God, we're going to let the Lord, and when it's capitalized, it's Yahweh. I went back to the Hebrew, that's what it says. So he says, Yahweh is going to be a witness between you and me.
And in the Berean, it's the Lord, and the Lord is capitalized, and that's Yahweh.
The Lord, yeah. When it's capitalized, that's Yahweh. So we're going to let your God be a witness between you and me. Now, it's the same one who told him not to attack Jacob, but now he's saying, we're going to set this up as a dividing line, and may the Lord keep an eye over you and me while we're apart. And that may sound like a nice thing, but the way it's written, the way it comes out in the original is more like, may God keep an eye on you so that you don't go back on this promise. And he says, if you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any other wives. Now, isn't that ironic? Jacob already has more than one wife, but he says, if you take any others, may Yahweh punish you, may he judge you. Now, think about this. He still is concerned about his legacy, about his lineage. And if Jacob takes other wives, well, then his wealth and everything else might go through them. It could happen. And so if he doesn't take any wives but Laban's daughters, then ultimately he can say, it's all still mine. You see, it all tracks back to me and not to these other wives. So he makes this, it's not an agreement between him and Jacob. He just makes this pronouncement and calls God as a witness. And he says, if you mistreat my daughters, if you take any other wives, or if you come back here, we're going to use this mound as a dividing line. And I'm going to promise I won't cross the line to harm you, and you won't cross the line to harm me. And this is all Laban. Laban has structured the deal, and he's called Yahweh as a witness to it all. Pretty tricky stuff, right? He may not be a full-time worshiper of Yahweh, but he knows that Jacob is. And so he invokes Jacob's God for this purpose. And so they have a meal together, and never underestimate the value of sharing a meal with someone. It comes up in the Bible. It comes up in the New Testament a lot. We actually thought about doing a class one time just on meals through the Bible, but it is one of those, whether it's a business lunch or socially, sharing a meal is a big deal. And they share a meal together. And then it says the next morning, Laban kissed the daughters and the grandkids and said goodbye. And this is the one thing I will mention. Laban had enough, sense to back off, because I've seen way too many times over the years that somebody just can't let go. Yeah, I just got an amen. They can't let go of a wrong. And he feels like Jacob has wronged him. And if you remember Pharaoh with the people of Israel and Moses, Pharaoh gets told, let my people go. And Pharaoh goes, yeah, okay, this first plague was pretty bad. I'm going to let your people go. And then he has a little time to think about it. And he says, you know what? I don't think I'm letting them go. I just don't think I can do that. It's too valuable to me. And so there's another plague, and he goes through this thing of at one point thinking, yeah, I can do that. And then I'm not going to let him go. Laban could have done that. Laban had this dream, that vision from God that says, leave Jacob alone, basically. And Jacob even says at one point up there that I did all this work for you. You changed my wages 10 times. And last night, God judged. That's the dream that Laban had. And thanks to Mary for that. It was a good catch. That's what happened the night before. So he says, last night, Yahweh spoke and said, enough of this, let him go. And so Jacob invokes Yahweh, Laban invokes Yahweh, but they both come to the point. Laban does let it go, and he heads back home. And that's not a maybe even a normal thing to do. And you see the hand of God involved in that by making this, how else do you explain something like that? That's a lot of wealth to let walk away. And by all rights, he could have said, they really are my daughters. You're just some guy from out of town. And I'm taking everything back. It's an amazing sort of look into humanity going through this. But Laban kisses the kids and grandkids goodbye. He goes home, and Jacob heads back to their ancestral home.
And the next, we're going to have him meet Esau. Do you want to just do a brief thing reminding people about Esau? So how Jacob left 20 years ago?
Jacob stole his birthright. I know everybody remembers that. He stole the birthright. Esau said, you know what? I'm going to let him live for now. But the moment my father dies, I'm not going to dishonor my father by killing my brother, my twin brother. But the moment dad dies, he's dead. And so his mother hustles him off. That's where he's been for 20 years. And he's coming back. Put yourself in Esau's place. You know that the birthright, the blessing, is Jacob's. I mean, Esau knows that. He had the conversation with his dad. Technically, Jacob has the right to claim all this stuff back, all this wealth. If you were Esau, would you be concerned about that? I would be, yeah.
And if you were Jacob, would you be concerned that Esau's going to kill you?
Sure, you would think Esau's going to, and if Esau gets the wrong idea, if he decides that's what you're doing, you may not get a chance to explain. And so while technically Jacob has the right to claim his birthright, there's a joke that I can't tell because it's off color, but it's about the difference between theory and reality. In theory, Jacob has the right to claim the birthright. In reality, Esau has an army. Esau is the one who stayed there and has, control of things. So they're at sort of not an impasse, but both of them have a frame of mind when this meeting is coming.
And people think the Old Testament's boring. It is not boring. I mean, once you know the story. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named the place Mahanaim.
And let's stop right there, because this is one of those weird things, and I want to take time on it because this hangs a lot of people up in their faith. We hear stories about angels. We hear stories about miracles. And it says that he was traveling, and the angels of God met him. And we think that's very odd. Sometimes people just say, I just can't believe this stuff. One of the things you need to know about the word, in English, it's angel. Now that's a Greek word, angelou, but that's another story. Angel in the Old Testament, almost always, it's the word malach, and it means messenger. There are times that it's obvious. It says malach Yahweh. That means these are messengers of God. And we know what that means. But there are lots of other times that same word gets used, the messenger of the king. The messenger of Jehu, who was, king of the northern kingdom. Anyway, malach gets used as messenger probably about as often as they get used as angel. And that's where you have to understand the idea behind what these angels were told. They are the messengers of God. And why? How do they meet him? Are these some other, human messengers? That's the problem with Hebrew. You have to be mature enough to not get so bogged down in the weeds that you don't understand that there are some messengers from God who meet them. And he says, this is the encampment of God. And he names the place Manahaim, which means the two camps. There's my camp and there's the camp of God. And he acknowledges that. And they do this thing of naming, giving a place a name so that they always remember what happened there. So do we know that this is somehow a troop of angels that meet up with them, or these somehow he recognizes them as messengers from God? And we can let it go with that. It doesn't change anything.
And the next sentence, when we see messengers, these are not the messengers of God. These are just part of his camp.
You know about future?
Jacob, no, on verse 3, Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to, yes. So now we're back to people.
The very next verse, it says Jacob sent messengers ahead, because remember, he knows he's going to go meet with his brother and he's got a plan. He's figured out, I'm going to soften Esau up a little bit, but he sends messengers, and it's malak. It's exactly the same word we just used.
So the angels, so it's translated either as angels of God when it says of God afterwards. So
That's
it's
right.
messengers of God. And down in verse 3, it's just messengers, and we're back to human beings of part of
They're
Jacob.
messengers of Jacob.
Yeah. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, you are to say to my master Esau, your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, men servants, and maidservants. I have sent this message to inform my master so that I may find favor in your sight. Let me stop there.
Yep. Carefully crafted message. Okay. And I'm going to go over why it's so carefully put together. But the other thing you have to remember, they don't have books. They don't have, computer. They have to memorize stuff. And messengers, and this goes all the way through at least medieval times. These messengers are trained to memorize, and they will deliver a message word for word. If you see, like at the Wailing Wall right now, they're out they're reciting scripture and they rock. It's a device to help them memorize. So he gives him this carefully crafted message. He says, you messenger, go ahead and find my brother Esau. And you tell him, I'm on the way. Tell him, though, I have lots of cattle, oxen, donkeys, sheep, goats. I've got, so he's telling him, you go ahead and deliver the message that I'm coming, but I got my own stuff. I'm not coming here to take yours. I'm already very wealthy, and I'm not after your things. And this message series is going to continue. But he also says, say that my master Esau. He's posturing. He's humbling himself, and he's calling Esau my master Esau. And that's to signify to Esau that, again, he's humbled himself. So he's not coming in saying the Lord and master of the birthright is back. He's coming in, with his head down. And it's a wise thing to do. You would not want to provoke Esau at this point.
When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, we went to your brother Esau, and now he's coming to meet you, he and 400 men with him.
And there you have it. Yep, we delivered your message. And he said, oh yeah, I'll ride right out to meet my brother and bring these 400 men along with me. That's an army. In that setting, Jacob automatically sees he's coming in to kill me. And he's brought enough men. Now, eventually, Jacob, if you're successful and you pay well, fighting age men will flock to you. They'll make more money working for you. And if you go conquer somebody, you get to keep the spoils. So that'll happen. And that's what's happened with Esau. But Jacob doesn't have that. He may have some people with him, but there's no comparison. So when he hears Esau's riding out to meet you with 400 men, there's an immediate assumption Esau's coming to kill him.
In great fear and distress, Jacob divided his people into two camps, as well as the flocks and the herds and the camels. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one camp, then the other camp can escape. Then Jacob declared, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, the Lord who told me, go back to your country and to your kindred, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant indeed. Indeed, with only my staff, I came across the Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother Esau, for I'm afraid that he may come and attack me, and the mothers and the children with me. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and I will make your offspring like the sand of the sea, too numerous to count.
So Jacob has this promise from God, and it's the promise that was carried from Abraham down through Isaac and now to him. And he knows that. And he was told when he was leaving, God says, I'm going to be with you. I'm not going to forsake you until I've done everything I promised. And you're going to come back to this land, and you're going to live in the land and prosper, and the offspring will be numerous. And Jacob knows all that. But when faced with the prospect that his brother is riding on him with 400 men, he divides his camp into two. So he makes his own preparations, and then he goes to talk to God. And
So he prays second. He's still not, God's in the equation now, but he's got it first.
And what he does is he sort of reminds God, okay, I've done all of my stuff, but let me remind you, God, that you made a promise to me. Well, if you believe the promise, if you believe anything you've heard, why did you have to divide your people into two camps? But let me remind you, you promised me that I was going to come back here, and I was going to inherit the land, and I was going to prosper, and my offspring would have the land, and they'd be numerous. Well, that can't happen if I'm dead. So now that I've made my preparations, I'd like it if you would not let it happen anyway. So he covers both ends. He covers all his bases.
And as you say, you try to make these people real, and there's nothing more real than this. I mean, how many times do we do this? Believers, we pray, but we're also trying to fix things ourselves. And sometimes we try to fix things ourselves and pray afterwards. I fixed everything. Now you need to help me.
He does a couple of, and by the way, you remember the bit about the household idols? And we talked about how they would kind of cover all the bases. They'd worship multiple gods. One of the ones that gets left out of that, and this is what Jacob has done. Jacob follows Yahweh, but his other God is himself. And he says, I'm gonna take care of this, and then I'm gonna go over here to Yahweh. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I do that. And I think I see signs of it in the world around us, that we become our own God. We rely on ourselves. And that's what Jacob has done. And now that I've done I've probably solved the problem by myself. But just in case, I'm gonna cover all the bases, and I'm gonna go talk to God. And I'm gonna remind him, you promised me. So I would appreciate it if you would stop my brother Esau from killing me. And he does say, I'm afraid. As I read that this week, I realized that, and I thought about Roseanne Barr. I don't know why. I can hear her saying, I ain't afraid or nothing, and we do that. But he says, man, I am afraid of my brother. We posture over this stuff, but here we are. He's waiting for his brother to ride in with the 400 men. And one last thing I guess I should mention, with 400 men, and you split into two groups, they've already, remember Laban rode him down, his brother's ridden him down. You split into two camps, all you've done is make it easier for him to kill one, and then they'll ride down the other. But his theory is, if I split them up, maybe at least some of us can escape. That's because preserving the line is so important.
Jacob spent the night there, and from what he had brought with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau: 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 20 milk camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He entrusted them to his servants in separate herds and told them, "Go on ahead of me and keep some distance between the herds." He instructed the one in the lead, "When my brother Esau meets you and asks, 'To whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose animals are these before you?' Then you are to say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau. And behold, Jacob is behind us.'" He also instructed the second and third and all those following behind the herds, "When you meet Esau, you are to say the same thing to him. You are also to say, 'Look, your servant Jacob is right behind us.' For he thought, 'I will appease Esau with the gift that is going before me. After that, I can face him, and perhaps he will accept me.' So Jacob's gifts went on before him while he spent the night in the camp."
And it's a good plan. And you understand that the dynamic between these two. And so he sets aside, and you've got the list, but that's a lot of wealth. I mean, for a common person, a peasant, if you've got a donkey to help you plow, to help you carry stuff, all that, I mean, that's a real luxury. Not everybody has that. And the number of cattle or sheep and goats and rams and ewes and milk camels, really milk camels? I never thought about that, but that's what they say. I guess they milked them like cows. They didn't have cows, but that's a lot of wealth that he has pulled out. And what he's doing is he's going, "I'm going to soften Esau up with a gift. And I'm going to show him once again, I don't need his stuff." It's a good plan, but he divides them into 3 groups even. So what's going to happen is the first messenger will get there, and he's going to have some of the animals with him. And in that part, lots of parts of the world, but if there's somebody herding animals through your land, you're going to want to know who they are, because it looks like somebody's moving in. So when Esau sees you and he asks you, "Who are you and who do those animals belong to?" you tell him, "Your servant Jacob." And divide it into 3. See, what that does is there's a chance Esau gets the first gift and he's impressed. But like Pharaoh, he starts thinking, what's the big deal? I'm still going to kill him. So he sends, the first guy comes there with some of the animals. And then the second guy comes up. And then the third guy comes up. And it's just this process of softening his brother up. This is what he hopes. And then you notice he figures Esau is going to meet the main encampment, the big herds, and the shepherds driving them are behind. You notice the plan is he will not have caught up with Jacob yet. So when he comes to the flocks and he talks to the shepherds, they're supposed to deliver the same message. Jacob is coming, but he's not here for your stuff. And if he was leading an army, if he was coming to attack Esau, he would have been up in front, at least somewhere very near the front. So he structured this whole thing to soften his brother up and to lay to rest what he thinks is going to be his brother's natural tendency to kill him. And it's a good plan. I mean, it really is a well-structured plan.
During the night, so Jacob is left in the camp himself, is the assumption here. So so Jacob's gifts went on before him while he spent the night in the camp. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream along with all his possessions. So Jacob was left all alone. And there a man wrestled him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he struck the socket of Jacob's hip and dislocated it as they wrestled. Then the man said, "Let go, for it is daybreak."
So I want to spend some time on this one because it's important to me that you be able to look at these scriptures and not see it as something that must be myth, because that doesn't seem possible. And I don't know if you've read this before, if you've studied it. We do a lot of commentaries. I read and listen to a lot of commentaries on the scriptures. And what happens is, for starters, Jacob, in the middle of the night, sends his wives and children across the river, and he still stays behind. This is all part of that process of softening Esau up. But it says that in the middle of the night, a man confronts him and begins to wrestle him. And it says a man. And you have people that say, okay, well, that's obviously an angel, and we'll get to that. And then some people, because of the words that get said, say it was actually God himself.
And even in the Breen, it says Jacob wrestles with God.
It's a title, but
Yeah.
that doesn't have to mean this wrestling
That's
match.
it.
So there are a couple of things, and we did get this from someone else this week, but to Abraham, who's a wanderer, a nomad, when God appears to him, he appears as a traveler, just someone on the road. Later, Joshua, who's a soldier, he gets appeared to as the leader of an army, another soldier. And here, Jacob is a wrestler, a fighter, a grasper. And what he gets appeared to as someone who wrestles with him. We hear the words, God comes to us where we are. I think there's, a good example of that. But they begin to wrestle. And where it says it's a man, people get hung up on that. It says man. I mean, it does. The word is ish. It's a man. But I want to read you something else. This comes from Daniel. And Daniel has this vision. The fourth day of the month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I lifted my eyes, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen. A man dressed in linen is the way it's phrased. He says, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around the waist. His body was like beryl, which is a stone. His face like the brilliance of lightning. His eyes like flaming torches. His arms and legs like the gleam of polished bronze. His voice like the sound of a multitude. Do we think for even a moment that man is just a man, right? So it says man, but we have to be grown-ups. We have to look at the whole thing. Now, the later on, it says the other people with him, with Daniel, didn't see this vision, but they were afraid of something. They ran away. And then it goes on through this, vision that he has. The man speaks to him, and another one comes along and gives him this message about what the end times will be like. And he refers to him as the one with the likeness of a man. The likeness of a man. Looks like a man, clearly he's not. This isn't unprecedented, what's going on here. And we go back to Jacob, and he wrestles, and Jacob is the grasper. Jacob's not letting go. What we don't know is, just like Daniel, was he awake? Is this a vision? Is this one of those struggles within the soul, or is it really a physical wrestling match? And in a few minutes, I'm gonna tell you why it may be that this is another vision, just like Daniel had. But they wrestle. There's this struggle, and it says that they were not getting anywhere, and the man struck Jacob, the socket of the hip. If you actually read that word, it's not the kind of strike like you would strike with a weapon. It's almost like he touched him. He dislocates his hip, and he says this fight is coming to an end, basically. And he disables him. But Jacob won't let go. He says, I'm not letting go. And his hip is, I'm not letting go of you. I haven't read it yet. I'm sorry. What else did I miss then?
No. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What is your name? The man asked. Jacob, he replied. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men, and you have prevailed.
There we go. So Jacob says, I'm not letting go. I'm not stopping until you bless me. Now go back when he pulled his trickery on his brother. What's he after? The blessing. And this time he's not letting go until he gets the blessing. And what I want you to see from this, when the deal with the birthright happened, we talked about the fact that Jacob gets the birthright, even though he's not the firstborn. Esau sold his birthright for a pot of stew, a bowl of stew. He treated it as unimportant. Jacob sees that blessing as being extremely important, so much so, I'm not letting go. And you see why he was more suited is the word, thank you. He's more suited to be the one who carries down this lineage over Esau. And so he says, I'm not going to bless. And then this man or angel says to him, what's your name? And I hear people say this, you mean God didn't know his name? Duh. I mean, why would you leap to that conclusion? That sounds so dumb. Why would you not think there must be something more going on here? Let me look at it. He says, tell me, what's your name? How do people call you? Como se llama, right? Luis? He's not listening. Como se llama? How are you called? How are you called? And he's known as the deceiver, the grasper. Now, this being knows that, but he says, think about how you're known to this world as a deceiver, as a grasper. You're not going to be that anymore. Instead, you're going to be known as Israel. Israel, anytime L is on the end, that means God. And this is someone who God contends. And this idea of getting a new name is very, very significant. It says you're a new person. Think about the Apostle Paul. He gets blinded on the road. He has been doing all of this stuff he's been doing. And we're told this time, this is an appearance of Jesus, because later Paul indicates that. But he says to him, Paul, it's not good for you to kick against the goads. In other words, you've been swimming upstream all your life. It's not healthy for you. Your name is no longer Saul. It's going to be Paul. Getting a new name is significant of you're a new person. You got a new life. That's what's happened. That's why the angel says, what's your name? And he says, I'm the deceiver. And he says, this is the blessing. You're not the deceiver anymore.
I don't know what we should do.
Is that all?
Should we
Oh,
stop
it's
there?
9:59. Yeah, that's good enough. So we're going to close it up, but make sure to get that point that this is the turning point. Jacob could have been the father of the nation without a name change. Israel is not some magical thing where it was always, it's the 12 tribes of Israel. It's
Could have been 12 tribes of Jacob.
It could have been the 12 tribes of Jacob. Absolutely could have. But this is about, up until then, Jacob has been one person. And he wrestles with God. And there is at least an inference that on that name, is it he wrestles with God or God wrestled with him? Did he prevail? Did he beat God? No, he submitted. He got his blessing and he submitted. And I know it seems a little deep, and some of it is because we wind up getting it through first Greek and then English. But the words that are there, they say what they say. And that blessing of you're now a different person than who you've always been is huge. And it changes the nature of the nation that he raises up.
I want to say one other thing that I had in my notes that that was one of the sermons we listened to this week that really hit me, and it went back actually to when Jacob was praying to God. One of these ministers says, prayer is the easy part. It's okay. I mean, it gets easy to pray if you're a believer. The hard part is in the waiting. And it goes back as we take up this section next week on wrestling with God. Jacob's walk, if you will, with God, he now believes in him, but will he wait on the answer of his prayers? They said the hardest part of prayer, this minister said, is the 15 minutes after you pray. Are you willing to wait for God's answer, or do you take it back yourself?
And I did promise one thing, I could do this in, quick. But remember, if you go back and read, if you ever read this yourself, when he's wrestling and it's going on all night. And this, I think it's an angel. I mean, I think it's a man in the same sense that Daniel was dealing with an angel. But he says, you need to let me go because daybreak is coming. And people who actually go read in detail then read that and they think, what is that supposed to mean? Is he like a vampire? The sunlight hits him and that's going to happen. Why is this idea of daybreak? You need to let me go because it's about to be dawn. Personally, after looking over all of the reference I have, I think there's a good chance that what's going on here is in this vision, just like what Daniel sees. He sees him as a man. He gets talked to as if it's a man, but Daniel clearly says this is a vision and the other people don't see it. Does it matter? Not really, except for the fact that I don't want anyone to go read this on their own and get confused and think, first of all, why would he need to cut this thing short at daybreak? There's nothing magical about daybreak except, you tend to wake up. So it's the best I have from this, but the idea of wrestling with God and taking a new name, Jacob accepts the new name. He accepts that as the blessing. And he does, in fact, become a different person from this point forward. Is that all? God, we always see in these words that you leave behind the plan that you have, the consistency. And even though we don't get visitations from angels necessarily, maybe we don't recognize them, we still see that you put people in our path. You send people with words that change us. We see that you give us a new name. You let us become something different, something better. You love us, but you love us enough not to leave us the way we are. We're grateful for that. And what I would ask this week is that you would send with us the memory of that and the memory that we're not required to remain the same person that we've always been, and that you're there with us, and that you send the strength and the words to help us be more. Amen.
Amen. Okay, you guys can unmute yourself, and moms, I hope you have a good Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's
And those
Day.
that are with their moms, treat them nice.
Yeah, Louise, tell your mother we said hello.
I will. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Happy Mother's Day.
I'm sorry I can't bring
Happy
any
Mother's
bran
Day.
muffins.
Bye.